Aloha. My name is Roger Jelinek. I'm Executive Director of the Hawaii Book and Music Festival. And it's my pleasure to welcome the attendees and our author and moderator. And I just want to let you know that if your Ohana and network and friends have missed this, and if you want to see it again, it will be available in the next week or so up in the Better Tomorrow Speaker Series YouTube channel. And then it will also be edited for highlights. So it will be reduced to maybe half the length. And that will be up on our website, and it will be up there for till the next festival, a year. In fact, we still have last year's up. So there are plenty of opportunities to see this. It's being live streamed to Facebook and YouTube. And so there are a lot of different ways to access it. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to our splendid guests. Aloha.
Thank you, Roger. My name is Jane Goodsill, and I have just written a book. And through writing my book, I got introduced to Virginia, who has just written a book. So my book is called Voices of Hawaii, and I interviewed many, many people in Hawaii about their experiences, life experiences. And then I took the best parts of their stories and put them in the book. And that is just by way of introduction. And now I would like to set up Virginia by reading a quote from my book. And this is about my mother, whose name is Ruth. So here I go. During the summers, Ruth sat in her living room chair and read out loud to us. She was like the Pied Piper, and soon neighborhood children of all ages gathered at her feet to listen to King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, the Chronicles of Narnia, Mike Mulligan and his steam shovel, and the Microbe Hunters. So Virginia read my book, and when she read that, she had some thoughts, and I want to turn it over to you. Would you prefer me to call you Virginia or Ginger?
Either does, it'd be fine.
Thank you. Tell me why you were amused when you read that little passage in my book.
Well, I absolutely love the Microbe Hunters. It sparked my initial interest in science. And so when I read that about your mother, I said, what a smart woman. Because the Microbe Hunters, about pioneers in medicine who discovered diseases and then took efforts to prevent them. And so I was reading a lot more about science because of that book. And also it drove me to read about other scientists like Alexander Fleming, who discovered penicillin and made such a huge difference in the world. And so I decided to enter a science fair and grow penicillin mold like Fleming had done.
Of course you did.
Yeah. And so I was reading, and I obviously misread because I thought it said, the book probably said that you should grow the mold on pot liquor, which is the leftover fluid from cooking vegetables because there's a lot of nutrients. But I thought it said corn liquor, which is moonshine. And so I went to my mother and I said, well, I can't do my science project because we don't have any moonshine. And my mother thought for a couple minutes, and then she said, that's not a problem. She says, I know the probate judge who handles all the moonshine cases in the little town we lived in. So we'll go to the courthouse and ask for some of the evidence after the trial. So we did, and he let us have the moonshine. And my mold absolutely loved it, grew beautifully, and I won the science fair, and I became a microbiologist. But the big lesson I learned was from my mother about you have to take every opportunity to knock the T off the word can't. So that was a great lesson.
Oh, that's one of your sayings in your family.
Right.
Oh, that's
better
so
knock that
sweet.
T off the word can't.
So tell us where you were born and tell me a little bit about your family.
Well, I had a rather unusual beginning because I was the first baby born in the hospital in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And my daddy was working for the Atomic Energy Commission there, and that's where the US was secretly building the atomic bomb. So that was kind of an unusual situation and a very interesting story about how that city started. Now, my family, I had wonderful parents, like you did, and hardworking, loving, just devoted parents. And I had two older brothers, Louis and Bobby, who loved to tease their little sister, lovingly, of course. And then my cousin Donna also lived with us a good bit, and she was like a sister to me, and she nicknamed me Ginger. And then later on, my granddaddy moved in and lived with us as well, and he was just a wonderful man and taught me a lot of lessons, and he called me his shining star. So now I call my granddaughter my shining star. So we were a very close-knit family, I think, because we moved a lot. And so we spent a lot of time together. And our parents were really good about, they said, you know, home is where you are, not where you work. And they were determined we'd learn everything we could about our new home. And that was a really good practice because I moved a lot as an adult too. So, but the main thing I really cherish is there was a lot of love and laughter in our home.
Mm. So that gets me to my next question. The title of your book is My Heart Smiles. Tell me about the title and why you wrote the book.
Well, that came from my parents as well, because when they looked at me, they would say, Ginger, you make our heart smile. And I grew up hearing that all the time. So I thought everybody felt that way. Then I learned they didn't, but my parents always did. And they were just, it was just a wonderful family life. I spent I think I started the book about over 20 years ago in Wisconsin. And I initially began because I was getting grandchildren. And I realized that a lot of my life they wouldn't know about. And I thought maybe some of the adventures or experiences or lessons learned might be helpful to them. And then I kind of broadened it out because there's been so many people I'd met and interacted with during my life, and decided to write it and publish on Amazon. And I had time during COVID when we were working from home, and then I retired. And so that's when I decided to go ahead and finish the book and publish it. And
the subtitle is about being an audacious academic. Tell me what that means to you.
Well, not having much fear and being a little outlandish. I was different being a woman, in science, and I just never hesitated to try to knock the T off the word can't and get things done. And I was kind of, I'm an extrovert, and I enjoyed people and liked interacting, and I liked laughing and having a good time.
Good explanation. Okay.
What you see is what you get.
What you see is what you get. And you spent quite a bit of time in Hawaii. Do you want to tell us that part of your story?
Yeah, I moved to Hawaii, and I came to serve as Chancellor of UH Mānoa. And I was at UC Davis at the time and hadn't thought about moving, but then I decided when the people called me from Hawaii, I said, they may need some of the experience I had, and so maybe it's a good match. You always look to see if it matches your experience and their needs. And it looked like an exciting adventure in a lot of ways and unique place. I love Hawaii, and I think it's very unique in the university. I hope people realize what a jewel it actually is. And I've worked at recently at 3 land grant public universities, and our mission is to solve society's problems. And so I love that activity and then educating the next generation for their lives. And so decided to undertake that event. And then I stepped down and after 5 years, and then I worked in the med school, where I started the mini medical school on healthy aging for the public, which was a great joy too. So it's been a wonderful experience. And I think Hawaii is a very unique, special place.
So tell us why a specialty in virology would have been valued at the University of Hawaii.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of researchers go into administration. And the reason being is that in research, you're problem solving and you work as a team. You know, you can only do your job if every team member does theirs. And that's very similar in a lot of ways to administration. You have a situation, you have a problem, you want to make a plan about how to address it or how to advance it. And then you test certain things to see if they work and then analyze the data. And then if they don't work, you make another plan. And that's the same as you're doing research in order to make progress.
So when you went to University of Hawaii, you were in the administration, and how did
Yes.
your audaciousness work in that arena?
Well, it's a lot of times you have to, I believe that a chancellor has to interact with the public and get to know them and find out what they think about the university, and actually kind of being kind of audacious worked for that. I wore hats all the time and did lots of things and spoke on viruses. I still work on viruses intellectually. And I think it helped bring people closer, I hope, to the university. We're regular people. We, want to interact and hear what they have to say and think. And sometimes you have to be a little audacious to make that happen.
And did virology have anything to do with your interest in the aging that you talked about?
Well, in a way, yes, it did, because I worked on influenza virus in humans, lower mammals, and birds for over 20 years. And of course, the biggest impact was on the older population. And so I would often spend a lot of time with older people, trying to encourage them to get vaccinated, learn about the viruses. And so I think, it did impact. And I had a lot of reasons for thinking the mini med school would be good for Hawaii. First of all, we have an aging population. Secondly, we have a lot of great people in the community that are interested in this topic. We've got a great department of geriatrics. And there's a respect for kapuna in Hawaii that does not exist in a lot of places because of the Asian and the Native Hawaiian cultures.
And when you retired, you remained living in Honolulu or in Hawaii?
Yes, that is my home.
Nice. Okay, so as I was reading your book, I was interested in your thoughts about problem solving. You mentioned that a bit, but I want you to go into it more. Ideas that work, ideas that won't work, and flexibility in thought, page 34.
Well, I've had a lot of experience with both. Everybody does. As I said, research is great training for problem solving. I'll give you an example of a story that I thought was a little unusual. When I was at UC Davis serving as provost and executive vice chancellor, I led an effort to secure a high containment laboratory for the states west of the Mississippi because we didn't have one. And it was very controversial.
Hold on a minute. Hold on. What is a high containment laboratory?
It's one where you have extra precautionary measures taken to contain the agents because they might be problematic if they got out. So you have a lot more security with those. But it's one where you work with, you'd certainly work with coronaviruses or highly virulent flu viruses that you want to keep contained.
Yeah.
It's like CDC has a high containment lab.
Mm-hmm.
Is that clear?
Okay. Yes, thank you.
So we worked on it. We had a great team and everybody did an absolutely amazing job. And we were a finalist. And then when the results came out, we didn't get the lab. And so I told the people, well, I wanted to have a celebration. And they looked at me a little peculiarly and said, well, you did notice we didn't get it. And I said, yeah, I'm well aware of that. However, we got so much better because of all the things that we did and learned and changed because of that. So we'll be really well prepared for the next opportunity that comes along. And that's what we're going to celebrate.
Nice, nice. So speak a little bit about flexibility of thought.
Well, I think you have to have the ability to change directions. If you look at data, which I'm used to doing as a scientist, you look and say, okay, that's not working really well. We're going to change it and go this way. I know one example at UH that I just loved. I went to the welcome for parents and new students one year, the first year I was there. And I called people in and I said, this isn't working. We're supposed to warmly welcome and inform people, and that's not happening. I said, I want you to be creative and think of ways to change it. And I don't have a pot of gold sitting under my chair that most people think, but use your creativity. And I said, and if it doesn't work, it's on me. It's not on you because I'm asking you to do this. So they went away and they check in and everything. And next year I went and it was transformed. They had done an absolutely beautiful job. And I said, you got to let people go. And then they sat down immediately and analyzed, well, this worked really well and this didn't work quite so well. So letting them go and lead and feel that success. And then they started analyzing immediately. And that's what you have to do. You're always looking to see, can we make it better? And be flexible about what you do. Some things work beautifully and some things don't. And that's what you have to deal with. By the way, after the first year, I told them they might be able to cut back a little bit now.
I want to go back and challenge you a little bit. You said many people who are scientists go into being administrators. We all know of the Peter Principle, where people get above the level of their maximum efficiency. So it's not always true that people who are scientists make good administrators.
Oh, no, I didn't mean it that way. But I know a number of scientists that have gone because they're used to working in teams and problem solving. But what happens, I tell people, when you're ready to go into administration, you'll know it, because there's a little switch that happens. When you become more interested in other people's success than your own, then you're ready for administration.
Oh, that is so nice. All right. So go back to a story that I read in your book, talking about how infections in hospitals can be spread. This is on page 162 and has to do with operating rooms and lights.
Well, in my first professional job, I was in a hospital, and part of my responsibility was to track down hospital-acquired infections, particularly as they involved antibiotic-resistant organisms. But that was a problem in the 60s, not just now. It was really a problem then too. So what I would do is go to surgical suites and burn units where we had most of the problems. And I would watch everybody, what they were doing, and sample the areas. And one day I was in a surgery, and the surgeon was very impatient. And he reached up and grabbed the light and changed it, which they're not supposed to do. They're not supposed to touch any surfaces, because then he went back to his operation. So then I sampled the light, and sure enough, that was where one of the hospital-acquired drug-resistant organisms was spotted. And so I felt really good about that. It was kind of like being a medical detective. And I realized that some people would maintain better health because I'd found it, and I enjoyed that.
And such a simple solution once you can think of it.
Watch, observe.
Yeah, right. Great. So you wrote your book to preserve memories and lessons that you'd learned in life, primarily for your grandchildren, but for whoever might be interested. Am I right?
Right. And I thought it might make them think about all the wonderful events in their own lives at the same time, because everybody has interesting lives.
So tell us about life lessons learned from a toilet.
Well, I love the talking toilet. I was giving the graduation speech for my son and daughter-in-law's graduation from medical school. And I was talking about research advances and how they helped human health. And I'm really big on plumbing because my granddaddy was a plumber. And there's a plan, and actually people are working on this, a talking toilet, so that your urine and feces can be analyzed with sensors in the toilet. And then the toilet will tell you if you're normal or you need to go get a checkup. People will probably have more problems talking to the toilet than actually using it. But I'm really big on the talking toilet.
Have we gotten anywhere? Is anybody actually moving forward on this idea?
Actually, there are particularly companies in Japan that are working on sensors that can detect abnormalities in urine and feces, even prostate problems.
The Japanese are very clever with toilets, I will say.
Yeah, they have some very interesting ones.
And to think that they could take the waste products and analyze them for general well-being, it seems almost impossible to do. And yet the concept is it's intuitive. Duh. Why wouldn't we do something like that?
Yeah, I'm hopeful to see one.
Love that. Well, so tell us about your grand mules.
Oh, those are my grandchildren. They're called Grand's mules. And I'm called Grand. So I can honestly say I'm Grand. And when my grandchildren were really small, I decided, children benefit from having responsibilities and having somebody depend on them as well, because they feel very dependent on everybody else. So when they were about 3, I started having them carry things for me, and with the goal that they would help me and take care of me. And so as a little, I only gave them little things, but then they got bigger than me. And they carry my luggage, my groceries, purse, everything. And Grand does not carry. And so it became kind of a badge of honor to be Grand's mule. And so tonight, when we were going to the grocery store, for example, my granddaughter, she carried everything. Then she offers me her arm to help me down the street. So it's actually quite marvelous, and it builds their self-esteem because you trust them. So those are my grandchildren, are my grand mules.
Oh, that's great. I love that. And those are the kind of stories that you tell in your book. Yeah, so many of them are just so funny. You talk about your children all over the place. So tell us about your interest in athletics, and especially in throwing the javelin.
Well, when I was a girl, there were no organized sports for females. Now, thankfully, my parents had me take swimming and tennis lessons because they wanted me to be active. But I didn't really get interested in athletics until I started working. And I noticed that a lot of my female colleagues couldn't deal with failure. In fact, they'd quit, and there weren't many to begin with. And that was really disturbing. So then I looked at athletics, and you get to practice winning and losing and having to keep on going. And I said, that practice is invaluable because it gives you resilience. And so that's how I kind of got started. And I worked on Title IX, and certainly Hawaii had the pioneer.
In case people don't know, would you tell them what Title IX is?
Was the inclusion of women in athletics and other academic endeavors. And so Patsy Mink and Dr. Donis Thompson from Hawaii were the pioneers in that. And so our sons were athletics and our grandchildren. And so I like sports and participation. But the way I got started on the javelin was my husband, Bill, is a volunteer track and field official in Hawaii. And he told me, well, there aren't many older women out there in the masters. That's the older group, over 50. And he said, and I think you can do it. So I said, well, I don't run or jump that well, so I'll throw. And our son, Lewis, had been a All-American decathlete, and he was really good at javelin. So the next visit I went, he cut off a broomstick and had me throwing it in the front yard, practicing. and helping me learn how to do it. And he said I had to have a primal scream too to yell. But he said, keep it short because your javelin doesn't stay in the air very long, Mother. And my other son, Bill, kept telling me, Mother, you need to explode. I don't think I've ever quite gotten that down. But then I started competing and won several gold medals and became Hawaii champion in my age group. Now, I will confess that I often was the only one in my age group, but that's just a minor detail. And then I formed a group called the Jazzy Javeliers. There are 5 of us, we're all seniors. And we went to the National Senior Games together, and our goals were to have great fun and not be last. And so far, so good.
Are you still throwing the javelin?
Yep. I was practicing when I was in Telluride with a broom handle again, and I drew quite a crowd.
I bet you did. Do you mind if I ask how old you are?
I'm 77.
Good for you. Oh, that's a great story. Did you finish telling us what you wanted to about success and failure?
Well, yeah, the example of Davis was a good one, but I think everybody has to learn how to deal with both resilience. But, I think you learn from both success and failure, and you should celebrate them to a certain extent because they're making you better, hopefully. Success is easy to celebrate.
Yeah.
It feels good. But actually, failure is the more educational because you look back and you think, okay, if I'd done X, would that have been different, a better outcome, or Y? And so you can analyze it and think about it. And I believe in learning from history. I do not believe in living in it because you can't change it. So it's all the analysis you can do to get better. And that's what I think is important.
I couldn't agree. I could not agree more. In my previous life, before I started researching things in Hawaii and started writing the book, I was a psychotherapist. And this goes right along with overall wellness as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, beautifully said. So have your grand mules read the book?
Yes. Oh, that's a requirement. They all got their copies. Then my granddaughter just pointed out to me, see, Grand, it's on the top shelf.
It's on the top shelf. So I don't know if you feel like talking about this, but I wondered, since you conducted all your influenza studies, if you might want to tell us some things about what we're experiencing in the pandemic days.
Well, I could talk about that forever, but I'll be brief. I worked on those influenza viruses for over 20 years and also worked internationally. So, these viruses are not local, they're global. And so you have to work with your international population to keep them healthy as well as you.
Are you talking about the coronavirus, or are you talking about flu viruses, or all the viruses you've been studying through your career?
Well, influenza has been my major focus, but this certainly is true for coronaviruses like COVID-19 virus. I'll compare and contrast a little bit. But first of all, we're in a pandemic, and a lot of people don't realize what it means when you have a pandemic, but it means you have a new agent, like a virus for humans. It causes a lot of death and disease, and it spreads easily person to person worldwide. We have other epidemics where it doesn't spread all across the world. Now, flu has caused a number of pandemics. There's not much doubt about that. This is the first time we've had a coronavirus like COVID-19 cause a pandemic. They have some characteristics in common. They're respiratory. They also have large animal reservoirs. For influenza, it's particularly migratory birds like ducks, and that's probably been there for millennia. Coronavirus is bats. There's a huge reservoir of those in bats. And so a lot of people always ask me, well, how did they get to humans? Well, it takes close contact. But one of the things we look at a lot are the live animal markets, where they have all these different species together, and then humans walking by, close contact. And so that's the reason you hear a lot about those, because that's where the transmission can occur, because these are both what we call zoonotic viruses, meaning they can move across species from animals to humans. And in this case, of course, we have a pandemic due to coronavirus, and it's traumatic. It's amazing to me that the U.S. is #1 in the number of cases and deaths, and it's very disappointing. The way we can help control that is certainly by vaccination. And vaccines have done wonders for human health. Eradicated smallpox, almost have eradicated polio, measles, all these diseases. So vaccines are just really enormously important. And I'm very excited about the new messenger RNA vaccines. I think that will revolutionize and improve vaccines as a whole. But we also have to have people take them. So one of our challenges is misinformation, conspiracy, politics, fear. And so I often tell people, well, I certainly took the COVID-19 vaccine to reduce the risk of disease and death for myself, but also for you. That is what we need to do. We need to do it for ourselves, but also for each other. So, and that's the way we can control pandemics. We will have another, and there are lots of viruses out there that can cause them. So we have to be prepared, and we have to take actions like vaccines.
When I was reading your book, I was interested in some of the things you talked about respiratory tract of mammals, page 167. Do you remember any part of that?
Yeah, influenza in mammals is respiratory, but in migratory waterfowl like ducks, it's intestinal. And so I spent a lot of time with duck feces and bird feces and isolating viruses. And the reason it then continues in that population is because it's waterborne. And so they can keep passing it on, and they all have flyways, and they go around and around each year. And so, and it typically does not make the bird sick. There are a few nasty avian viruses that will make birds sick, but most of the ducks have absolutely no problems, just like the bats don't seem to have any problems with the coronaviruses.
Well, has there been any transmission from birds to humans?
Well, we have a lot of evidence, Jess, of what flu does. You're talking about flu now?
I don't know enough about it to ask the right question, but you had talked about birds and you had talked about fish, and I was wondering. You had told us the bats could transmit to humans. Now I'm wondering about ducks and the migratory birds.
The migratory birds, what happens with avian flu is it's continually certain. The birds have all the different subtypes of influenza viruses. Okay, so they got them all. And so what happens on rare occasions, it's not real common, but if you have an infection of one cell, either a human or a duck, with an avian virus and a human virus, the viruses can swap genes, and you can get a new gene introduced that comes out, which then can cause a pandemic because we haven't seen that particular product before. That's one way influenza virus causes pandemics.
But we're just paying attention to this one in a different way, different than we ever had with the flu.
Yeah, well, this one, the coronaviruses, there are a lot of coronaviruses in bats, and so they could easily exchange genes too, and that's what they're watching for. And mutation. Both of these viruses, flu and COVID-19 virus, mutate. And that's why we changed the vaccine for flu each year. And with the COVID-19, we had the Delta variant, which is more infectious and contagious, and it became dominant because it spreads more readily.
Right. You had said, you talked about your trip to Beijing. That was page 171. Do you want to tell us something about that?
Well, the beauty of research and education is it crosses country barriers. And so a group of us went to China before it was open to have an international meeting about flu. And then 7 of us took a 3-week trip around China. And you knew it was a sleeping giant when you saw it, because it was amazing. But one place we got off of the train, and this woman who's probably about my age now walked up to me and started rubbing my hand. So I casually asked the woman that was with us, what's she doing? And she said, well, she'd never seen a Westerner. And they were described as pale, wide-eyed, big-nosed devils. And she thinks you fit the description. And she thought this was powder, and that if she rubbed hard enough, it would come off.
and she had no luck with that.
No, I still stayed that way. But then they invited us to a village celebration where they were celebrating an elder who passed, and it was lovely.
Oh. We have a question, and it's from Ann R. She said, recently the male lion at the Honolulu Zoo died of COVID virus. So animals are victims of this virus as well as humans. Is this true of the flu?
Oh, yes. There was an H5N2, which a lot of people read about, highly virulent, which means very deadly, influenza virus that killed 800 people, but it never became a pandemic. It didn't spread easily, but it killed all kinds of other species. It killed some tigers in a zoo when they fed some infected chickens to it. It spread to many different species. So there was great concern about that. And we're still watching it because it's still out there, but it didn't transmit readily person to person. And so therefore it didn't cause so much problem. But these viruses can infect other species. Both
Is it naive?
and
Is it naive of me to ask about whether you were concerned about contracting some of these viruses when you were doing virology tests and taking your kids out to find duck poop and so on? Tell us about that.
I did take my children out to collect poop and to sample birds with me. And I know because it's a rare event. And so I don't think you react in fear to natural wildlife populations. In the lab, you're very careful about how you handle viruses, clearly, but the likelihood is slim. I know it could exist. I don't know if you read that one story about my sister-in-law.
Tell me.
Well, every year we used to go vacationing with my brother Louis and his wife Pat, and I'd take little vials with swabs and we'd pick up bird droppings off the beach. And one year,
every family does, Ginger.
Well, one year Pat went with us, and we were over on the sandbar, and we weren't careful about the water coming in. And Pat didn't swim. So we had to figure a way to get her back to the beach because the water was rushing through. And so that was a big struggle. And when we got to the other side, she looked at me and she says, Ginger, why don't you collect seashells like everybody else?
Which I might say, I collected these myself on Papahaku Beach. You could have been doing that all this time. That was a good question. Thank you, Anne. So you mentioned to me that sometimes you use the phrase refresh your soul, and I wondered what that meant to you.
Well, it really refers to actions or experiences that you undertake to move yourself from a negative mindset to a positive. How do you make yourself refreshed? And I have a visualization that I do. I have a candy dish in my head, and it's full, and then people take out, take out, take out. And I know instantly when it's empty because I overreact to little things, which I shouldn't. And so I say, time out, I need to refresh my soul. And that means it could be a cup of coffee with a friend. It could be, a walk outside to look at the ocean. It may take longer in some situations, like massage or, exercise or whatever, but it's whatever you as an individual do to make yourself strong to go forward and not fall back into a negative mindset.
Oh, that's well said. Your candy dish is a perfect metaphor. And you can feel when it's empty because you said
that's the trick. You yourself have to learn when it's empty.
Yes.
Because then if you push past that, you may really not do some good things.
Yes. And one of the things that helps you detect this emptiness is this sense of irritability or emptiness or agitation.
Yep.
Ah,
Yeah, I can.
well said.
I notice I can't find something, I'll overreact and get upset.
Yeah.
But that's ridiculous. It's a
Yes.
small thing, and it's the small things that I notice, and if that happens, I say, "Time out."
Yeah. Yeah. My Achilles heel is when I have a project that I want to move forward. I'm working on transcribing an interview or editing it or something like that. And there's a glitch with the computer. Oh my, I just lose my composure. And my candy jar is empty. I'm fatigued and I'm very goal driven. I want to accomplish this thing. And if I can't get the computer to work, I can't accomplish my goal. Oh no, the sky's going to fall. Yeah.
How do you
Good time.
refill yours?
Well, in many of the same ways you do. I go out for a walk. Sometimes I take a rest. Sometimes I close my eyes and just rest my eyes because I'm tired. Sometimes I go and just touch my husband's head, just human contact. Sometimes I'll call a girlfriend and say, I just need to whine a little bit. It could be any number of things. And I can feel when I'm getting back in balance because the tightness up here begins to relax. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very good to study yourself in that regard and then know when you need to, take a time out and refresh it.
And a really important thing to teach our children and our grandchildren, because there are obstacles that come up in the world. And if we don't know that life is difficult, they can expect things should be easy. Like I think things should be easy on that computer because most of the time they are. And when they're not, but that's on me. That's my problem. Like you said to your people that you gave them a hard task, you said, if it doesn't work, it'll be my problem, not yours.
Right.
Yeah, that was smart.
It's interesting when our boys would come home from school or we'd come home for work. Sometimes you need to decompress.
Yeah.
And we'd ask them, did anybody have a harder day than usual today? And so then we'd give them extra space and time to decompress.
Oh. And my husband and I have an arrangement where if we just need some quiet time, we make a no-fault quiet arrangement. If he asks for free time and needs to be uninterrupted, good. I know that refreshes his soul, and I'm happy to do that for him. And sometimes I need contact when I'm agitated. We need different things. So let me go on to something else you talk about in your book is that you find great value in mentors. Could you tell me something about that and how it figures into your life?
Yeah, mentoring works. I'm a big believer. I've had many mentors myself. Some I've learned what I didn't want to do, and some what I wanted to do. But you need to have lots of mentors. I've just been very fortunate in a lot of ways to have, and I've sought out mentors, and I serve as a mentor. And one particular one that was very important to me was Dr. Emilio Simora, who was my graduate professor for my master's and my PhD. And in between the master's and the PhD, I went out and worked and had 2 children, and then went back and got my PhD. So I wasn't a typical grad student, but his family was from Mexico. And I could recognize his understanding of what it was like to be a minority. As a woman in science, I was, and he was ethnically. And he was so supportive. He just was an enormous positive influence in my life through graduate school. But then he also helped me get the job at UC Berkeley and later on at St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. So he was a wonderful, wonderful mentor. And I think one of my greatest moments of pride was when one of my own graduate students won an award for mentoring. Because if you mentor, they'll learn how to mentor. So it's very important.
When I retired from being a practicing psychotherapist, I still practice, but I do it in a mentoring capacity. And what I'm doing is teaching what I know to other people so that they can find some solace in their own lives. And they're learning how to do what I do so they can share it with other people. And it's the people who've taught me, I'm so grateful for. And then we have the ability to pass it on to others. And I think it's a life gift.
I was also telling people that, okay, I can help you not make the mistakes I made, but you can make your very own.
Say that again.
I said, I'll help you not make the mistakes I made, but then you can make your own.
Yeah, I can't prevent you from making your own, and you will learn a lot from making those mistakes. I want to tell the people in our audience that we are very happy to answer questions. So please send them in if you will. Also, I have one more question I want to ask you, which is leadership. How do you define a leader? Is that a fair question to ask you, Ginger?
Well, I have a quote that I always, it's not a quote, I made it up, but I carried it around with me all the time. A leader is a person with a vision, passion, and ability to achieve the goals and maintain the values of the people they serve. And I think both of those are intertwined and should be.
And so would you say that again for us?
Okay. A leader is a person with the vision, passion, and ability to achieve the goals and maintain the values of the people they serve.
Very good. Very
and
good.
I think you do that by promoting the ability of others to succeed. A lot of times if people think, you've got to have people around you that are doing wonderful things and activities. And if you help them succeed, you are successful, but it's their success you're after.
And that is nice. And that can be a very satisfying niche to be in, to help others to succeed. Which now I have another question to ask you. What is it that you like to do? What are you passionate about and doing with your retirement?
Well, I still teach. I love to teach. I've always thought that's a wonderful profession.
And what are you teaching?
I teach graduate students in virology. And I sometimes teach on leadership or women's issues or viruses, whatever, but typically graduate students. And I serve on some boards of nonprofits and feel that that's a great contribution to the community. And I have to admit, during this last year, one of my areas of focus has to be with people I love and enjoy, because we've been shut off from them for a while. And so that's one of the reasons for our trips this summer is to be with those folks and enjoy their company and tell them you love them.
Yeah. And I think you in person, but I think you accomplished that. Obviously, you told your people that you love them and showed them how you love them by writing this book. It shows through in every page. The stories you tell about them, the stories you tell to them, the errors that you can share about what things you've made mistakes with and the things you've had success with. I think you clearly share that with your family and your readers. Is there anything else you wanted to say about your book? Well, you can tell people where they can get it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And show the picture of it.
And it's on Amazon.
My heart smiles.
An ebook, black and white or color print. And I actually think it's really a neat exercise down memory lane. When you have to choose, and you had this with experience clearly with all the interviews you did, you have to choose certain things that you can include. But it makes you think about them and re-enjoy them or wish differently for them or whatever. But it's really a nice adventure. I thought of it as an adventure. Yes. Thinking about the joys and the traumas, because there are traumas in life, whether it's cancer or death or whatever. But it's good to think about those and relive your own adventures and see what's so very precious about your own life, not just somebody else's. Yeah.
I did have an experience. I interviewed so many people for my book, over 75, and the book is only 200 pages, and I had to figure out which stories would encapsulate the concepts that they were so courageous in sharing with me, and then how I could put them into chapters that people could easily read and digest, understand history, and understand humanity. Similar in some ways to you're sharing life lessons, and the people I interviewed were sharing their life stories, and I got to share some of the things they said.
Well, I thought your book was great. It was like memory lane to me, because I know a lot of these people.
Do you?
So it was really interesting. Oh yeah. And I think I love humor. And I think that, your humor comes through in my life. We're kind of funny in a lot of ways. And my husband and I said, we laugh a lot. I said, a lot of times at each other, but that's okay.
I have a story to tell about that. Parents would come and they would bring their adolescents for therapy, and it was serious, because the kid is just not functioning and the parents aren't happy and the kids. So I meet with them together, and then the parent goes into the waiting room, but it's not soundproof. And I'm in there with the kid. And after a little while, the kid and I are just laughing. And the parents going, what could they possibly be laughing about? We could laugh about the way the kid would say, well, this is what's happening in the household. This is how so-and-so's reacting. And I'd say, well, the quote, Dr. Phil, how's that working for you? And they'd say, it's not. And I'd just start laughing. And so would they. And it just changed everything. And I said, okay, is there another way to do this? Do you want to keep living like this? So yeah.
Yeah, laughter is really good for you. I have actually give a talk about that. It induces endorphins, which are the feel-good hormones, which runners get, but I don't run, so I won't get them that way.
Well, you get it from throwing your javelin, from throwing your broomsticks.
And laughing. And then it reduces stress hormones like cortisol. It relaxes your muscles for up to 45 minutes after you have a good laugh. Induces natural killer cells to help your immunity. I mean, it's really good for you.
Good to hear. And it reminds me of how often people are talking about really incredible, sometimes tragic things, and I'll end up laughing. And I'll say, do you hear yourself? And they say, yes. And I say, well, it's almost to the point of the absurd, isn't it? And they say, yes. And we can feel the trauma of it, but also the humanness of it. Yeah. And you got to love that part of it too.
Well, I'm a breast cancer survivor and thriver. And so you develop a certain dark humor about certain things.
The soldiers do too. Same.
Yeah, you do. And you have to laugh to kind of let it out.
Yeah, I agree. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I'm not noticing any questions. Roger, is there anything you wanted to ask? You're muted, I think.
All right. I do have a question. I can only think new thoughts by writing. So I was wondering if you discovered anything new about yourself in the course of writing this book.
That's an interesting question. I discovered I didn't know a lot about some computer programs that I should have. That's for sure. As far as personally, I think I realized I'm a very positive person. I'm half glass full, glass half full. I think I learned that a lot of the impact of people in my life showed up in the book. How that made me feel positive about myself during my life and able to overcome adversity and stuff like that. So it made me appreciate even more a lot of the people in my life. And how they had impacted on my own abilities and personality.
Were you surprised by anything?
Well, how hard it was to write it down, and how hard it was to pick which to choose. That kind of surprised me. There wasn't a surprise as far as my life, although I noticed that a couple of times my son said, well, Mother, I don't remember it that way. So we do have selective memory. So that kind of surprised me sometimes.
I arranged one of our panels was between David Louis, who was Lieutenant Governor under Governor Abercrombie, and I had Abercrombie be his moderator. So I wanted to know if they agreed on what had happened. And Governor Neal said he had the book with lots of pink slips in it. He said, these are all the things I disagree with. Yeah. But he didn't elaborate. But I thought it was nice to have.
As you age, you actually do tend to remember the more positive things in life. And I give a talk, I'm doing it next week on your program, about aging and the fact that one of the things that changes when you age is you use both hemispheres of your brain more, but you go back and forth more, left side and right side. So you become more compassionate. In addition, your amygdala in your brain, they become less active, but they're associated with anger, fear, and hatred. And so that's a good thing. You mellow and you see them more positive. Of course, it makes you liable for scammers, but
Isn't there another phenomenon that the kind of the filter that we all apply in our interactions tends to fall away when we get older?
I think so. I think we remember the positive more. And I won't go back to the negative. I have another visualization. I have another box in my head that has a gnarly creature in it. And when I start thinking about the negative things that have happened, and there have been enough, that little gnarly creature starts coming out, and I reach up and slap the top down and say, I'm not going there. I'm not going to spend my time and energy on that. And that's a visualization I've used on a number of occasions.
Interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So are you going to do a sequel?
I need another life.
It sounds though you've had enough in your life to do at least 2 books, if not 3. So.
Well, I've been fortunate in so many ways, and I have thought about writing more, but I was thinking more about fiction.
Oh, really?
Ooh.
Well, no, that's really hard work.
Yeah, I know. I read voraciously. I'm a good nerd, and when I was a little kid, I used to allow myself 15 minutes of pleasure reading. So I taught myself to be a speed reader unknowingly. And so I love to read, and I read these great books and everything. And I don't know how they do it.
Well, they do it by
Impressive.
rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. And then they send it to someone like me who says, that doesn't work.
Well, there was an author that said, well, writing isn't that hard. It's just you sit there until blood forms on your forehead.
Then there are some people who write a whole book in a weekend. That's to me is astounding. You know?
Well, I appreciate authors because I appreciate you're doing this program because I think writing is such a joy to share. Yeah. And I will say the hardest moment was pushing the publish button.
How long did it take you to write this?
Well, I started 20 years ago, but I didn't work on it because the jobs were too consuming. But I think I started back on it in April of last year. I published in December.
Well, that's about right. When you say you started 20 years ago, do you keep a journal?
Well, I kept what I'd written. Yeah, I keep stories. I write down stories as they happen. So just in case my memory is not as good as it should be. So yeah, I do write down stories and keep them.
So we have another book of stories to come then.
You see?
That'd be fun.
I'm a literary agent, so I'm always hunting.
I'll call you, Roger.
Well, I think we're about time to close, and so thank you, attendees. And I just want to tell you again that you can have access to this again, and your friends can have access to it again on the Better Tomorrow Speaker Series YouTube channel where we keep our things. There's a bit of a traffic jam at the moment because we have so many programs, but they will be there, and eventually it will be in a highlights version on our website. So there are a lot of different ways to access this. And again, thank you very much, both of you. And I enjoyed it. I hope you did.
Hello, it's great.
I love talking to you, Ginger. Thank you so much.
See you in Hawaii.